Exploring the bizarre. Your e-ticket ride into the world of the paranormal. Strap yourself in as we traverse the universe, exploring the unexplained. UFOs, ghosts, lost worlds, cryptozoology, as well as other dimensions. It's time to take back the night. Now, your electrifying hosts of Exploring the Bizarre, Timothy Beckley and Tim Swartz.
Wow, Tim. You know, it's really spooky out here. I almost feel like singing a couple of lines here from an old Rolling Stones song. I'm gonna love you night and day. Well, love is love and not fade away. Well, love is love and not fade away. Wow. We're out here in the Bermuda Triangle. What in God's name are we doing here anyway, Tim?
Well, Tim, we're kind of like Scooby-Doo and the gang. We're trying to solve a mystery. You know, there's been dozens, maybe hundreds of planes and ships that have vanished around here. And we need to know if there's maybe an alien base at the bottom of the ocean or some sort of freaky weather phenomena causing these disappearances.
Wow. You really take this whole co-hosting job seriously, I see.
Yes,
well, there's a dense fog coming toward us, and I see the meters spinning around and around.
Whoa.
Some sort of EM effect. Well, I'm afraid we're going to fade away.
Yep, well, and we both seem to be disappearing. I can see through my hands. So we better make it back to the KCR studios quick for tonight's show. Come on, let's go.
Well, love is love and not fade away. Wow. Man, you know, it's good to be back on solid ground. That Bermuda Triangle area really spooked me out. You know, I wouldn't want to go out there, without the Coast Guard or maybe Mac Maloney kind of sending a couple of warplanes out to guide us along. It's just a heck of a trip.
Well, and you know, Tim, that there are other mysterious areas all across the planet that are similar to the Bermuda Triangle. I know there's what was it called? Was it the Devil's Triangle?
Well, there's one off of China, I think.
Yeah.
I remember my old buddy there, Ivan T. Sanderson,
mm-hmm.
or was it Charles Berlitz? I can't remember. Wrote about the Dragon's Triangle. Where
they both did.
They both did. Yeah, they both did. Well, sure enough. Yes, of course.
Well, and the Michigan
other
Triangle.
Yeah. And there's even one in New England.
Yes, that's right.
And that's on solid ground. I don't know. You know, it's a spooky phenomena, but of course the Bermuda Triangle is the big daddy of all danger zones on planet Earth, I would say. Anyway, I guess we have already recovered from Thanksgiving, and we're headed towards the day when Santa comes down the chimney. or maybe Krampus leaves some cold. Yeah, I think.
We celebrate the arrival of Krampus in our house, of course.
Well, we welcome him as well, you know. But Tim, what the hell? Let's get on with the state of affairs at KCOR and Exploring the Bizarre. Who do we have tonight as our guest?
Well, Tim, I'm really happy tonight because we have two fantastic guests. We have first of all, we have Bruce Gernon, and this is Bruce's first appearance on Exploring the Bizarre. So I'm really happy.
He doesn't know what he's in for.
Nah, we're. But see now, Bruce on December 4th, 1970, Bruce was flying near the island of Bimini when he encountered something that changed his life forever. And this what happened to him there eventually led to his discovery of a new theory about why planes and ships sometimes disappear on calm, sunny days in this notorious region of the Caribbean. Now, Gernon is a certified seaplane flight instructor and a master captain with Coast Guard license. He's appeared in numerous documentaries about the Bermuda Triangle in which he describes his space-time warp experiences. Now, Bruce is the author of the books The Fog, a never-before-published theory of the Bermuda Triangle phenomena, Beyond the Bermuda Triangle, True Encounters with Electronic Fog, Missing Aircraft, and Time Warps, and Bermuda Triangle Legacy, Exploring Electronic Fog, Space-Time Warps, and more. And he wrote those books along with Rob McGregor, who I tried to get onto the show with Bruce, but Rod never responded to any of my emails.
Well, he's disappeared in the Bermuda Triangle. What else?
I think so. That would be very appropriate for tonight's show.
I would, yeah.
Okay, well, now also with us tonight for his return visit, I think this is his third time on our show.
At least I would whistle if I could, but
third time.
Yeah, you get a whistle the third time you've been on the program.
Oh,
very good. You got to do the one with the fog blows at midnight. What is that famous movie?
Oh gosh,
the foghorn.
No idea. All I can think of is the Foghorn, the story by Ray Bradbury.
Okay. Well, my favorite movie, or one of them, is The Fog.
Oh yeah. Carpenter's movie.
Yeah. So there you go.
Okay, so Mac Maloney is with us again tonight. Now, Mac is the author of numerous science fiction series, including Wingman, Chopper Ops, Starhawk, and Pirate Hunters, as well as the nonfiction books UFOs in Wartime, What They Didn't Want You to Know, and Beyond Area 51. And, of course, we'll be talking about his latest book, Mac Maloney's Haunted Universe. Now, Mac grew up in the Dorchester section of Boston and was taught to read and write by the nuns of St. Anne's School. His father was a veteran of World War II and was a fan of military books, something that Mac grew to love as well. Now, Mac started writing books in 1984 and has been doing it full time since 1987, penning over 330 books. And he is the host of a national radio show, Mac Maloney's Military X-Files. So, Mac, Bruce, thank you very much for being with us tonight on Exploring the Bizarre.
Well, I'm looking forward to this one, and I want to know what happens to all those planes and ships there in the Bermuda Triangle. Bruce, clue us in here. What was your experience like? Your first experience, and why did you decide? Were you looking for something in particular in the Bermuda Triangle, or were you just flying through there?
Hey, Tim and Tim. Yeah, I was on a business trip coming back, but thanks for the introduction, and I really enjoyed listening to you two guys talking about the Bermuda Triangle. That was really entertaining.
Yeah. Well, we try to combine the seriousness with the entertaining, without ridiculing our guest or the subject matter. We just ridicule ourselves. But go on. Tell us of your experience, because that's more exciting than anything we could come up with.
Well, it happened back in 1970, so I've been researching it ever since because it was such a phenomenal experience. And I had a brand new Bonanza Beechcraft A36 single-engine airplane, still being made today in identical shape as the 1970 version that I had. But it was Andros Island is where we took off from, and I was near Bimini, like you mentioned, but I never actually even saw Bimini. It's a time warp type of experience that I had where I traveled 100 miles in only a few minutes. And I got about 30 minutes ahead of time somehow when I had this experience. And I realized after I've escaped this unusual storm that I had experienced something incredible. So I put it to memory from then on, and I still really memorize it just about every day. So I have like a mind picture of what I experienced, like a video.
Mm-hmm.
And,
Well, tell us about. You say it was a storm.
Well, it appeared to turn into a storm. It started off when I reached the eastern edge of the Great Bahama Bank, where the shoreline of Andros Island is. It had been raining over Andros that whole day, and we were able to take off at 3 o'clock in the afternoon when it finally started to let up. And then it was still stormy, light rain, though, over the island of Andros, which is the biggest island in the Bahamas. And it cleared up when I reached the ocean. And that's when I first noticed this unusual cloud that was hovering a mile or two offshore, and it was about 500 feet above the ocean, and it was about a mile long and 1,000 feet thick and half-mile wide, and it looked like a lenticular cloud, and that's kind of like an hourglass-shaped cloud that you see sometimes like in a mountain wave, lee side of a mountain. But it was just hovering right there. And at the time, I didn't realize that lenticular clouds don't normally stay that low. They're usually up around 20,000 feet. And it looked harmless, and it was directly in my flight path on instruments flying direct to Bimini. And I was only at 1,000 feet when I first saw it, and then when it cleared up, I was able to start climbing up. So I climbed up over it and started aiming direct for Bimini. So then when I got over it, I was able to contact Miami radio, radar control center there, and file the flight plan by air, because Andros didn't even have telephones back then. And after I got through filing, I looked around the plane, and then something strange started happening while I was not paying much attention to this cloud. It had spread out, and it was still right below the airplane now, and I'm climbing now. I'm over 4,000 feet, and it's still right below me. And I keep climbing, and it's climbing about the same rate as me. And so I'm going up and higher and higher. I get up to 10,000. My dad was co-pilot. He was a licensed pilot. And he said, maybe we better turn back to Andros. And I said, well, I didn't really want to do that, because then I'd have to penetrate deep into the storm probably. And I figured it was a cumulonimbus thunderstorm that was in the birth stage, and I just happened to get caught up in it. And I got caught up in it several times as it would engulf the airplane, and I'd go inside it, and it appeared to be like a regular cloud with near zero visibility. But then I'd break free, and I could only get a couple hundred feet above it, and I'd catch up to me again. And this went in and out of this cloud for about 4 or 5 times. And then finally I broke free at 11,500 feet. And I was traveling at 110 miles an hour while I'm climbing up. And this storm was spreading out faster than I was climbing. I didn't really.
Was your plane rocking back and forth?
Just a little bit when I'd get inside it, and then it would boost me out of it. Just a little bit of rocking, not too bad. And so when I broke free of it, and then I look on either side of me, and now I could see this storm had spread out on either side of me as far as I could see, which was like at least 10 miles or more on either side. And I noticed it was perfectly curved. And I leveled off and started cruising at 200 miles an hour. And tried to forget about this storm because I thought I was clear now. And then only a few minutes later, I look in front of me, and here's the opposite of what I'd just seen, with that perfectly curved shape of a semicircle. Only now it had built up to over 40,000 feet. So I couldn't climb over it, and I figured, well, I'll go under it. And then I looked under, and there was no base to the storm. It had no ceiling. In other words, usually there's a gap of rain where you can fly underneath through the rain. Usually a couple thousand feet is the ceiling, and but there it was laying right on the ocean, so I couldn't fly under it. So I penetrated into it. I'm still going direct to Bimini, and when I got inside it, there wasn't any rain, but there was these intense flashes of lightning like I'd never seen before. But I heard that they're not that much. They weren't that unusual, according to some meteorologists I talked to. Instead of lightning bolts, they were like flashes, and they got really intense, and it started to get a little scary. So I turned out and went back into the center where it was clear again. And then I contacted Miami radio because I had to tell them I was deviating from my flight path. And they said, fine, call me. When I get around this storm, I told them it was a storm. I was going to see if I could fly south and get around it. And so I started heading south along the edge of it. And as I kept going along the curved edge, I keep looking ahead of me, and now I see that that curved edge is going back toward Andros, where I'd come from. So apparently it seemed obvious I was like trapped in this huge circular donut-shaped storm. And I was in the clear center of it. And so now I'm about 100 miles east of Miami. And then I see where the two ends of this storm are meeting. It was like, apparently it had spread out from Andros, and it spread out in a circular form. It'd be kind of like taking gasoline, pouring a circle of gasoline, and then you ignite it on one end. Well, that's what this storm did. It ignited. It didn't act like a normal thunderstorm. And so where the two ends met, they met on the bottom first, and then there was like a big valley in between. So that's where I wanted to go and head direct to Miami. And then the tops met. They formed like two anvil heads, and then the two anvil heads met together. And it formed a huge horizontal tunnel that was at least 10 miles long. And at first the tunnel was maybe a mile in diameter, but it was slowly, but faster than I realized, getting smaller. And we decided to go ahead and aim through it, and we went to full power because I noticed it was getting smaller, and it was right about at the 10,000 foot level, so we dove down and entered into it. And when we entered into this tunnel, something incredible happened. The instant the airplane created into the tunnel, these strange lines instantly formed. And they weren't there when I was outside of the tunnel.
No, so what did you say? Straight lines? Yeah,
they were like, well, they formed a line. They were like puffs of clouds hovering just off the walls of the tunnel. And each cloud was about the size of, say, a bus. And they were slowly rotating counterclockwise, like maybe a few RPMs. And so that was the beginning of seeing something. I believe that was like seeing the fabric of time when I saw this creation inside this tunnel. And so then it should have taken me almost 3 minutes to get to the other end of the tunnel, because I've studied these tunnels before, and they usually last a few minutes. So it was going to be pretty close. But the thing is, I was only in the tunnel for like 20 seconds, because that's when time started changing while I was in the tunnel. And when I reached the other end of it, wingtips scraped the edges of it. So it was like less than 30 feet in diameter now. And then when I made it out the tunnel and reached the clear blue sky, I looked behind and I watched the tunnel collapse behind me. It formed like a slit that was now rotating counterclockwise from my.
Well, now looking back at this event, I mean, where are you, or were you frightened of the fact that it might have swallowed you up like some of these other planes, and nobody would ever see you again?
Well, no, I'd never heard of the Bermuda Triangle.
Oh, you did? You were not familiar with it? Well, let's pretend that you were. I mean, because you've certainly read and heard about it since then. I mean, do you think these planes and all the and ships that have vanished have gone into some other dimension or some other time zone?
Yeah, some of them. Yeah, sure. Yeah, they have, because it definitely affected time with me. And what happens is, part of my theory is that within these tunnels, like those small clouds that I saw swirling around, some sort of electromagnetic energy is created, like in the form of a dipole, a positive charge on one side and negative on the other, and they swirl around inside the tunnel. And when the tunnel collapses, it emits a sphere of what I call electronic fog. And that's the thing where hundreds of planes and ships have, and people on land too, even have experienced this electronic fog. So that's the main thing that I'm trying to get the world to understand.
Well, now what's creating this phenomena?
These tunnels that form usually around 10,000 feet in between thunderstorms, or this special type of storm that I flew through. And when the tunnel collapses, it emits a sphere of this electronic fog, and similar to other fogs, this fog can last for many hours. And maybe it could be 100 yards or a couple of 100 yards in diameter. And it can go up if there's updrafts, or if there's no updrafts, it can drift down to sea or even to land. And it can last maybe up to half a day or so. And what makes it different than other fogs is that it attaches, but that's similar to like St. Elmo's fire that attaches itself to crafts and vessels.
Well, here comes the fog.
in the form of music. Yeah. And this music is telling us that it's time to go to our first break.
Now back to exploring the bizarre with two of the most electrifying researchers in the paranormal. Your hosts, Timothy Beckley and Tim Swartz.
All right, welcome back to Exploring the Bizarre. I'm Tim Swartz. Tonight we are talking with Bruce Gernon, and in just a little bit we'll bring Mac Maloney into the conversation. But I want to ask Bruce here. Bruce, when you exited this unusual weather phenomena, I'm sure at the time that you thought that you had just gone through like a thunderstorm, albeit a bizarre one. What happened afterwards that showed you that this wasn't an ordinary storm, that something weird had just happened to you and your father?
Well, after I made it through the end of the tunnel, another incredible thing happened. The blue sky that I was planning on flying through immediately turned dark gray, kind of a yellowish eggnog type of gray. And then I also felt this strange sensation that lasted almost 10 seconds of zero gravity. But it wasn't just zero gravity. It was also a feeling of skidding forward like I was hydroplaning. And I've never felt that feeling before or after. And I look at my instruments to see where I'm heading, and it's was supposed to be straight for Miami, and my compass is spinning all by itself, and my 3 electronic navigational instruments are all malfunctioning. So I couldn't figure out my exact position. I should be 90 miles east of Miami. And so I asked my dad for a position fix, and he couldn't come up with one. Then I realized that everything was going haywire. And then not only that, there was no more visibility, and yet visibility appeared to be good. It was like I thought I could kind of make out the ocean, but it didn't look like the ocean. And I couldn't see the horizon or the sky. And so I got on the radio, and I was able to contact Miami Radio. And they couldn't find me. I wasn't on their radar. And so I told them I was like 90 miles from Miami, and they said there weren't any airplanes anywhere, even near Miami or Bimini, anywhere in that area. And so my dad kind of went into a state of panic at that point. I was able to calm him down, and my passenger, business partner, became nauseous or something like that. He was talking to me, and I couldn't understand a word he was saying. He was kind of like going almost out of his mind, I suppose. So the radar controller couldn't help me. So I said, well, we'll just keep flying, see what happens. And then after 3 minutes, another incredible thing happens. These lines formed parallel to the direction of flight of the airplane. At the time, I thought the lines were maybe a few miles long, but that was an hallucination because I was in this cocoon of fog. And so those lines were actually only a few hundred yards long. And then the lines cracked open, and I could see blue sky through the cracks. And it took about 10 seconds for the lines to get wider and wider, and the cracks to get wider, and then they were all gone. And I'm in clear blue sky, and the radar controller was real excited. He gets on the mic, and he says, I got a plane directly over Miami Beach. And I look at my watch, and no, I've only been flying for 33 minutes. I got another 30 minutes before I reach Miami. And besides, I never saw Bimini. We were supposed to fly right over Bimini, the chain of islands in Bimini. And he says, are you sure? And then my eyes focused finally, and then there it was, Miami Beach right below me. So I thanked him and signed off with him. And then I had to go way out west to fly around another huge thunderstorm, which is kind of unusual because there was like a bridge that I had to fly underneath down to 500 feet over the Everglades, way out west to get to Palm Beach International. And so the whole flight was like 250 miles long, and it always took me at least 75 minutes to make that flight. And when I landed, I looked at my watch, and it had only taken 45 minutes. So somehow I got there 30 minutes ahead of time. And then I also saved 10 gallons of fuel.
Now, if we could just get the captain of American Airlines flight that I take to do the same thing, we'll be okay.
Right.
I don't know. Well,
I'm not sure. I'm not sure about that, Tim. I think that Bruce was lucky that they came out of it, because I mean, if other planes or ships or people,
Sure.
I mean, there may be cases where people went through this but never came out the other side.
Well, even on not only in the air or on the water, but possibly on land as well. I mean, we've got hundreds of cases where people just seem to walk into oblivion. In fact, in our UFO hostilities book, Tim, remember we wrote about an incident that took place in World War I, where a whole battalion walked into a cloud bank supposedly and was never seen again.
Yeah. So it seems like throughout history that there have been other cases that are amazingly similar to what Bruce describes, which makes me curious. Bruce, have you talked to anybody who, after you went public with your experience, that has anybody come to you and said, I went through the same thing, but I wasn't going to tell anybody about it because it's just too weird?
Well, I've talked to dozens of boaters and pilots that have experienced the electronic fog, but I only communicated with one other family that their grandfather flew through a tunnel similar to mine,
mm-hmm.
and it was near the Carolinas, and he had a space warp of a few hundred miles after he came out of the tunnel, similar to me, and not only that, he went backward in time instead of forward. He went back like a whole day.
Oh, wow.
He was flying a Gypsy Moth twin, or it's a double winger. Back in World War II was a flight trainer thing. And he used to always tell all his family about it. And the grandkids thought he might have been crazy till they read my book. And then they realized that their grandfather actually probably experienced the same thing as me. And so we wanted to write their story in my new book, and because it was a great story. And they wouldn't let us do it. I said, well, why not? And he says, because we're going to write a book about it.
Oh. And of course, they probably never will.
Probably, because it's very difficult to get a book published.
Oh, man, that's too bad. Oh, gosh. Well, now, okay, is this phenomenon, the electronic fog, can it happen anywhere, or are there places like, say, like the Bermuda Triangle, where it can happen more often?
Yeah, it appears to happen more often in areas not too far from the equator. And it can happen even in the edge of the Everglades. I experienced it there in 1996. I experienced a weaker form of electronic fog, but it was scary to experience. And my wife was with me. She was really freaking out. But and the interesting part about that was that when I got caught in this fog, the electronic fog over the Everglades, I was able to contact the Weather Bureau, the Flight Service Station, they call it, to get a detailed weather report. And I told them, because I was a little nervous, that I didn't have a lot of fuel, and I didn't know if I would be able to land through this fog, And he told me there was no fog reported anywhere in Florida.
Wow.
So you guys,
that could certainly be dangerous. Now, I wanted to bring Mac into the conversation here. Now, Mac, I had heard a couple of cases, and I don't know if you're familiar with them, where people, flying in small planes and all, would be going over an old military base or military base, and they would see an event that took place on the ground years and years before. Does that ring a bell with you?
Yeah, we have a story in the book, Haunted Universe, about just such a thing. There was let's say 8 years before World War II broke out, this senior pilot in the RAF was flying just a training flight or a shuttle flight, heading back to a base, I think, outside of London. And he flew over, and it was bad weather, and he flew over. He got lowered to the ground just to try to pick up some landmarks to make sure he was going in the right direction. And he saw this base below him. And he actually wrote down a number of details about it, what kind of planes were there. They didn't look really right to him, and that all the people on the ground that he could see, the mechanics and so on, they're wearing bright yellow, which was also very odd. And so then he, was able to get home. And then 8 years later, it turns out that this base, which had been deactivated after World War I believe, it had been reactivated when World War II came along. And the planes were newer planes than, he had ever seen at that time. And the people walking around in the yellow overalls, those were the RAF had issued them to trainees, to mechanics who were training. They would wear yellow so people could kind of differentiate them from, the real mechanics. So this guy, he was just a solid, guy, a no-nonsense type guy, but he could only conclude that, he somehow was able to have a peek into the future.
Well, I've heard of a few cases over the years that were kind of similar to that, and of course, I think Tim, now you've written about incidents and episodes where people were driving along, and they actually seem to have gotten sucked into some vortex or some tunnel.
Oh yeah. Well, I mean the whole time slip phenomena a lot of times begins when a person is walking along or driving along, and suddenly they'll find themselves like in a fog bank that and then they'll have their experience, and then when the experience is over, the fog dissipates and they're back to where they started. There are numerous stories where, especially at night, where people will be driving along and it'll get foggy and it'll be so bad that they feel like, that they have to stop for the night. They'll stop someplace, they'll find, say, like an inn or a hotel. They'll stay there, have a great time. And the next morning they'll leave, and then, maybe on their way back, look for this place, and it's not there.
Well, didn't the Eagles sing that? The welcome to the Hotel,
Hotel California. But the odd thing is that a lot of times, because you would think, oh well, if this was, say, like a time slip, or like kind of like what we're talking about, that they'd go back and people would say, oh yeah, well there used to be a hotel in this location, but it burnt down years ago. But a lot of times there'll be nothing. People will be like, no, there's never been anything like that around here, which just really, to me, just adds to the mystery.
Well, it's Mac. Now, what in this new book that you have just come out with? A couple of weeks ago or a month ago?
Yeah, about a month ago, right?
And what is the main thrust of this particular title?
Well, as you know, I had written 2 UFO-related books before, UFOs in Wartime and also Beyond Area 51. And so I had a lot of research that I had gathered, in the course of researching those books, that you just never got to use it. It just didn't fit here or there or whatever. And I've been collecting weird stories, almost all my life anyway. And then so I combined that with, I worked for a couple of years for Turner Broadcasting on their Conspiratorium website. And we would come up with 10 strange stories every month and basically get pictures of them and caption them. And so I had a lot of material left over from that. And also, not that we're in competition, but, I do my own radio show, Mac Maloney's Military X-Files show. And we have usually 2 UFO cases or strange cases on there every week. And that also piles up research-wise. So I just combined it all together. There's about 250 very strange stories in there. And it's, ghost planes, ghost ships, haunted battlefields, a monster for every state of the union, and just a lot of weird things.
I'm glad. What would we have here in New York?
I'll have to look it up, but I know you have one.
Well, of course, New Jersey, we got the Jersey Devil. That's the most popular one there. A lot of Bigfoot sightings in New York here over the years. That's for sure. What would you say were your top 2 or 3 cases that you put a lot of mustard into, not mustard gas, but mustard into the whole thing? I mean,
well, the one thing about the book is that for the most part, The stories are very brief. I grew up reading those Ripley's Believe It or Not paperbacks.
Frank Edwards and all that, yeah.
And I just love that kind of stuff. So that was the format we put this in, and with the idea being that there's so many stories, and they're all so strange. Most of them are very, very strange. That by the time you read the book, if you read it cover to cover, at the end you have to say, we really live in a very weird existence, a very strange reality. One of the and strange things happen all the time. They don't have to be paranormal necessarily, though a lot of them are, but just odd things. Like, for instance, in World War I, talking about mustard gas, in World War I, there was an enormous battle in the summer of 1917 near a Belgian village whose name I'm not even going to try to pronounce, but you can imagine it was right on the front lines, the no man's zone and the trenches facing each other. And this battle was so intense that they actually took aerial photographs of it afterwards, and they found out that there was more than 1 million artillery craters within a square mile, and that's an enormous, enormous number of artillery being shot back and forth. Anyway, with all this stuff going on and this battle going on every day, and it was also the rainiest summit that they had in Europe in a long, long time, it turned all this churned up earth to mud. And in some cases, the mud was 15, 20 feet thick. And so what would happen is soldiers on both sides, they just take a misstep or whatever, and they disappear into the mud, and they'd be gone forever, literally gone forever. At the end of the battle, more than 500,000 people had been killed, and 100,000 of them were never identified. Many of them had just disappeared into this mud. We call it the haunted mud. So that's just a frightening type thing to happen, but also like very weird. And the book is filled with kind of stories, unusual stories like that.
Yeah, the thing that I enjoyed about this book, Mac, is that it reminded me of, like you said, when I was a kid, I used to be able to buy these paperbacks at the drugstore. Brad Steiger wrote a lot of them. They had titles like, the weirdest ghost stories or, weird psychic women, things like that. And the same kind of format that you had, like maybe just a couple of pages, or a page per story.
Right.
And I just ate those up. So it's nice to see, that you're continuing this kind of format.
Uh-huh. I just like it because, as I said, I liked it as a kid. Even though I'm a writer, I don't like to read long passages of text, maybe because in my bad dreams I'm typing it or something. I don't know.
Yeah, I've been there.
But just to kind of get the gist of, what the particular incident, what went on, and it, I think 2 or 3 paragraphs, kind of says it all, and it's a jumping off point in a way for people, they want to explore more, then do a little more research and you'll see the story behind the story. But we also have strange things in there like, the 10 worst spies ever and the 10 worst military ideas ever. At one point in 1958, the Pentagon wanted to detonate a nuclear bomb on the moon to show the Russians that, we weren't lagging behind in the space race after the Sputnik went up. In fact, Carl Sagan, a young Carl Sagan, was one of the people who promoted this idea. And finally, someone in the Pentagon, had, cooler heads prevailed, I guess, or saner heads prevailed. And they said, why don't we just take the money and put a man on the moon? And that was like one of the things that started pushing the lunar flights. But at one point, they were going to detonate a nuclear bomb on the moon at night during a full moon so people in the United States could actually see the explosion.
Oh, wow.
That's a bad idea. It's a very bad idea.
They need to do that on the 4th of July.
Yeah. Oh, God. Well, I mean, that's no worse than what did they do? They, exploded nuclear weapons not over Hawaii, but over the Pacific, up in the atmosphere.
Yep.
Yeah. So.
Yeah, they did, but they would have, because you never really get rid of that stuff. We know that by now. I'm talking about the radioactivity, but it does, weaken and so on and so forth, and it doesn't contaminate the Earth really. But if they had, detonated a nuclear bomb on the moon, there is no atmosphere. Anything that happens up there stays forever. The astronauts' moon boots, the footprints are going to stay there for hundreds of thousands of years. And the whole place would have been, or a large part of the moon would have been contaminated with radioactivity that wasn't going to go away. So that was, I mean, it's arrogance beyond mindless thinking, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
No wonder they don't want us to land there. I mean, well, I don't know if we'll, we talk about going back, but so far we haven't gone very far back. I don't know. It just seems crazy to me that we could have done it way back when and not be able to do it now. Okay, so you've collected all of these reports, military reports and stuff like that. What's your general conclusion as far as the UFOs go? Are they hostile towards us?
No, in the book I did, the first UFO book I did, UFOs at one time. We have like a couple hundred stories in there documenting when UFOs showed up during wartime, not just recently, but over the ages.
Oh, yeah.
And out of all those stories, I think we have 3 in which the UFO had any kind of showed any kind of hostile intent. The vast majority of them, they would just ride alongside. For instance, British bombers during World War II bombing German cities in the middle of the night, with anti-aircraft fire coming up, bombs dropping, planes being shot out of the sky, and these crews would look out and there'd be a flying saucer or a cigar-shaped object flying off their wing. Now, they wouldn't do anything. They didn't exchange shots or anything like that. They were just kind of observing, just watching. And that was the whole idea behind UFOs at one time, that we had so many stories that documented these types of things, or at least eyewitnesses accounts, that you just have to kind of, when you finish the book, you got to shake your head and say, well, they all can't be mistakes or hoaxes or anything. Something must be going on, So, but like I say, very few. You can count on one hand how many times that UFOs actually showed some kind of hostile intent.
Well, unfortunately, and this isn't any hostile intent, Tim, but we are going to have to go to our top of the hour break in just a few seconds here. So when we come back, we will continue this fascinating conversation with Bruce Gernon and Mac Maloney, and we'll find out more about the mysteries of the Bermuda Triangle, UFOs, and other weird things in our haunted universe. So stay tuned.
And I promise not to get lost in the meantime.
Oh, that would be great. We'll be right back.
Exploring the bizarre. Your e-ticket ride into the world of the paranormal. Strap yourself in as we traverse the universe, exploring the unexplained. UFOs, ghosts, lost worlds, cryptozoology, as well as other dimensions. It's time to take back the night. Now, your electrifying hosts of Exploring the Bizarre, Timothy Beckley and Tim Swartz.
All right, welcome back to Exploring the Bizarre. Here we are in the second segment, and our guests tonight, we have Bruce Gernon and Mac Maloney. And so, Mac, I mean, what's your impression with Bruce's story and the whole, Bermuda Triangle, and and really other devil spots around the planets where it seems like especially aircraft seem to have a difficult time occasionally.
Well, what's interesting about Bruce's story is that he mentioned the island of Andros. It is the largest island in the Bahamas, but there is a Navy base there that a lot of people refer to as the Navy's Area 51. It's called AUTEC, and it's right across from the Florida coast. Is a deep trench in between, and because the Gulf Stream has been going through there for millions of years, so they do bring U.S. Navy nuclear subs there. To test things that they can, in this trench, they can test different electronics, see if the stuff works, and so on and so forth. But they also have billions of dollars worth of sonar equipment there, and radar, and everything else. And And on top of that all, as you've probably heard before, there are many, many UFO reports down in that part of the world, and many, many USO reports, unidentified submerged objects. And people see this stuff happening down there all the time. So we asked the question in the book is, the Navy, denies that they have anything down there that's, not, let's say, of public record. Yet people see this stuff all the time, so you have to ask the question. Well, you got billions of dollars of sensor equipment down there, radar, sonar, and you're saying you're not seeing any of this stuff. Yet people, civilians, are seeing it all the time. So either your stuff doesn't work, or you're misleading us. But anyway, that's right in the middle of the Bermuda Triangle. I mean, it sounds strange, but the U.S. Navy has their own Area 51 in the middle, and they built it in the middle of the Bermuda Triangle.
Yeah, Mac, I would say Andros is really the heart of the Bermuda Triangle, island itself and all around it. And,
right. There's a lot of strange stuff that goes on right on the island itself. There's a lot of myths about, they have these holes, on the island, and they're kind of deep. Right, yeah, and they say, people see strange things coming, going in and out of these things all the time. There's, like I said, a lot of myths having to do with the place. And, just in the middle of all this, you have this top secret Navy base.
Right. I met one of their executives there once, and he told me a story. He had been, we were at a bar, so I think he had a few too many, but he told me a story he shouldn't be telling. And he was actually wearing a nice shirt that had the words and AUTEC on it. So he was one of their commanders, apparently. And he told me he was on a sub in the tongue of the ocean that you just mentioned. It goes down 6,000 feet. And this tongue is about 100 miles long and 30 miles wide. And he was on the south end in their submarine. And they had this strange experience. All their electronics went out. And it sounds like the electronic fog underwater, but anyway, compasses were spinning, nothing was working, and this lasted for like 3 minutes, and that's how long I was in that fog too. And then it all cleared up immediately, just like it did for me too. When the fog dissipated, it electronically dissipated. It only took like 10 seconds, and so then all their instruments start working again, and so they check their position. And they had traveled 100 miles north to the northern end of the tongue of the ocean in 3 minutes.
Well, another thing people see down in that area is, you're talking about USOs. What they see is objects underwater moving faster than they should be able to, physics-wise, let's say, much faster than torpedoes. They look a lot larger. We have stories about how people have been on Navy ships down there, and these things have gone like right underneath the ship and leaving like a fluorescent wake. And lots of people see them. No one ever wants to really, get into what they might be. They could be on top of, secret weapons. I mean, it is the Navy's Area 51, so yeah, I guess we could expect it to be a lot of secret weapons, down there, and maybe we have USOs. Who knows? But lots of people see them. Lots of civilians see them. They've been seeing them for years in this area, and yet the Navy just, says we don't see anything.
Well, yeah, a lot of these stories that you were just, that you just talked about with some of these very fast-moving USOs right underneath the surface. I mean, there's been reports for years. I mean, long before supposedly we had any kind of technology, if it would be, some kind of man-made top secret technology. I mean, you had people in sailing ships who were reporting unusual lights going very fast under the surface. So it's now some of them could be man-made top secret craft, but this is something that's been going on for quite a long time.
Right, and there's definitely, I mean, when you're talking about airplanes and aircraft and rocket powered craft, there's some limit as to how fast these things can go. in the air. But it's way up there. I mean, the space shuttle had to be going 18,000 miles an hour to get into orbit. But when you're in the ocean, you have a lot of factors, working against you. If you want to go very fast underwater, you have the water, you have the pressure, and so on and so forth. So to see something traveling very quickly under the water anywhere is just very unusual and strange.
Mm-hmm. Bruce, talking about your experience with the electronic fog, it just, and I wish I could remember now who had this experience, but I remember reading a similar experience that somebody had, except that they were on a boat, and they suddenly found themselves. It seemed like that they were in a valley in the ocean where the waves or water or whatever you had suddenly was towering above them, and they were almost going through like an open topped tunnel in the water. And a very similar, experience where they were experiencing some bad weather and heavy fog, and then the next thing they know, they were. They seemed like almost that they were on the bottom of the ocean. Have you heard that story before?
Well, I can't remember that particular one, but I have two friends. I lived in the Keys for 15, 20 years, and they had experiences that are similar to the ones you're talking about. One was like you just said, they were in sort of a channel. Mm-hmm. With the ocean water was like 10 or 12 feet higher than the boat was on either side of them, and it went on for a long ways, and then they finally got out of it, and it was real scary. And then another one was crossing the Gulf Stream to Bimini, and they sunk down into like a large area where they were 25 feet lower than the sea level around them. And they were really, really nervous. And then I guess it leveled off after a while. But the rogue waves have been proven to be a large reason why ships or boats disappear, and they blame it on the Bermuda Triangle.
Yeah, but this phenomena seems to be more than just rogue waves, and which makes me wonder, is this something that they are actually seeing, or is it like an optical illusion caused by whatever this bizarre phenomena is?
Yeah, things like that can create an optical illusion because of the human mind. It's like the electronic fog attaches to the aircraft and flies along with you. So pilots that have experienced it don't realize that. I mean, I was the first one to realize that it was attached to me both times that I experienced that electronic fog. But most pilots still, even today, they don't realize that. And there's been pilots that have been in it that they're see illusion because they don't realize it changes your thinking. You think you're flying through fog, but you're not. You're flying with it. There was a famous writer named Martin Caden that wrote 200 books or so, created the bionic.
Oh yes, I had some correspondence with him, yeah.
Yeah. Well, he helped me a lot in my research to figure out how this fog works. He wrote about it on 3 different occasions in some of his books. And one time that he was in it, there was like a hole in the cloud, a perfectly round hole above him and below him. Well, the second time I was in it over Everglades, there was a perfectly round hole right below our aircraft. And it was really strange because it was traveling with us. I just thought I was seeing some strange phenomenon. It took my theory, which I created like about 4 years after that, to realize that, okay, it was traveling with me. But Martin Caden, he said in one of his books, he said he felt like he was flying inside milk bottle.
Hmm.
You see? So he didn't realize that the milk bottle was attached to him. But see, that almost spells it out for you. The milk bottle, he was flying inside the milk bottle, and the milk bottle's flying right along with him.
All right. So how does this phenomena attach itself, like you said, to an aircraft? I mean, is it like electricity is attracted, to metal? But anymore, not every airplane is made entirely of metal.
Yeah. Well, I've worked with several scientists on this, and the latest one is Professor David Paris from University of Nebraska. He's a physicist and a meteorologist both. And there's a chapter about his research in my new book. But he says that it's ionized energy in the clouds embedded in a dipole field that forms a cocoon around the airplanes or the boats.
Mm-hmm.
And he's got it all figured out, calculated and all that, and how it works and how it can create a linear displacement with the vessel. The boat can do it too. They can travel through time, I call it, but most people don't like. Scientists would never say travel through time, although they're slowly starting to change their thinking.
Which that's my next question. I mean, how could a natural phenomenon like this displace a ship, a plane, people in time and space?
Yeah. He calls it a natural warping of the fabric of space and an external ionized confinement field. In other words, electronic fog forms around the aircraft, creating a linear displacement.
Well, I mean, if that is the case, then that really would throw physics, a physicist, into a tizzy.
Quantum mechanics is starting to help explain it.
Well, and it also, I mean, it then leads us to questions about our reality and cosmology and all of that, and how time is supposed to work, to be able to either go into slightly into the future or into the past. Have you come across any stories of people who have gone a lot further than, say, just like a few minutes or a day or something like that?
There's a famous engineer for Boeing named his last name is Suter, John Suter or David Suter. He created the Boeing 747. He was the chief engineer over 1,000 engineers, and I met him once in the Bahamas, in Long Island, a remote place where he had a nice mansion. We were at a party there at a local hotel, and so I told him my story and my research, and this was like 20 years ago or so, 30 years. And so he told me his story. He was flying the 747 from Boeing Field in California and direct to China. And when they landed in China, somehow he went backwards in time a whole day.
But as far as he knew, I mean, he didn't run into any bizarre weather or anything like that.
No, he didn't mention much about weather. He may have been in the fog though, but at night, didn't even see it.
Well, Mac, what about you? I mean, in all the files that you've collected, I mean, have you run across any stories? I know you gave the one earlier about the World War II pilots. But anything else that you may have run across that's similar in nature?
Well, there's we don't have, to tell you the truth, now that I think of it, we don't have a whole lot of time travel stories in the stories that we collected in the book. I'm not sure why, but I guess my answer would be no.
I got a question about UFOs for Mac, and one for you, Tim Beckley, too. I'd like you to explain something to me. But
all knowledgeable Tim is here. Yes.
Yeah. I have seen a lot of flying saucers or UFOs, and I've even had some real close encounters within a few yards. But I just hadn't. The last encounter I had was just over a year ago, and it's like the first one I've ever really seen in the daytime. And maybe Mac can answer this one for me. It was shaped like a boomerang. It was flying low over the Everglades, and it was only a couple thousand feet high. And I thought maybe it was a big jumbo jet on final for Miami International. But I kept looking at it. It was shiny, real shiny silver. Didn't appear to have any windows. And have you ever seen what the UFOs look like? Where that famous sighting of long time ago? What was his name? That spotted the first. He coined the term.
Well, you mean Kenneth Arnold?
Yeah, Kenneth Arnold.
Yeah. We've had his granddaughter on the show 2 or 3 times.
So I don't know if he drew it, but someone drew it, and he has a famous picture where he's holding the.
Yeah, crescent. They were crescent shaped. Right.
They were actually shaped a lot like a Nazi super weapon called the Horton, where the Nazi scientists, in a quest to try to get wonder weapons to win the war, designed basically what it was a small flying wing. And it wasn't very successful. But when you see the drawings of Kenneth Arnold's, sighting, he was the first one to coin the term flying saucer, because the media said he said they look like saucers skipping across a lake. That became flying saucers. But they look, and he saw them, flying in formation and so on.
I've seen them flying in formation too.
Yeah. So
it was silver and shiny, and it was super streamlined, and all of a sudden, it makes a really sharp U-turn, a climbing U-turn, and a 180, and it heads right back to the Everglades. And there was a really large, isolated thunderstorm over the Everglades, and it just aims right into the heart of the thunderstorm, right at the 10,000-foot level, and then disappeared. So I was wondering, I can't decide, was that like an alien vessel or a remote secret vessel that we have here in our Air Force?
There's a lot of military drones that we don't know what they look like. The military has been flying drones for many years. They had many drones over Vietnam. Actually,
it would be big though. The wingspan had to be a couple hundred feet.
Well, people have seen that shape a lot. I mean, the Hudson Valley sightings in the 80s.
Oh yeah.
People have seen
we have a fellow. Tim, what's his name? Richard Surratt?
Yeah.
Who's been on the program, and he's made a pretty detailed study of these boomerang and crescent-shaped UFOs. And I guess what is his conclusion? Some of them could be made here, and some of them could be made there. Mm-hmm. So I don't know how you. Now the I think wasn't even the Phoenix Lights, the original one. Right. I mean, not the so-called flares, but the one that went over the highway and traveled 200 or 300 miles and covered a huge span of the sky and was totally silent. I mean, how do you talk about having advanced craft, but how do you get something that's that advanced?
Right. And then, Tim, I wanted to ask Tim, because we have something in common. The first UFO that I witnessed, I was 10 years old.
Oh yeah.
So, you want to tell me what you witnessed at 10 years old?
Well, it was two brightly lit objects. I would say lights. I can't really say objects. I didn't see any portholes or landing gear or anything like that. But they circled in the sky for maybe about 20 minutes or a half an hour. One was over an abandoned factory building across the street from where we were living, and one was hovering pretty much right over to the house where we were seated on the front porch. And the next day, or the day after that, there was a little item in the newspaper that the authorities said that they had tried to investigate it, and it was nothing more unconventional than a weather balloon. But this one, it couldn't have been. Everything gets blamed on a weather balloon. I don't care whether it's the mogul balloon or what. There's no possible way it could have been a weather balloon. This thing was not bobbing and weaving in the air currents. It was circling overhead. Now, Mac, what's your conclusion, I guess, on, we talk about UFO hostility, the Captain Thomas Mantell case? I mean, some people think that he was actually, shot out of the sky or blown out of the sky. And
all right, well, Tim,
blamed.
We'll have to have Mac answer this question when we come back from our bottom of the hour break. So stay tuned for Mac's answer on Exploring the Bizarre.
Now back to Exploring the Bizarre with two of the most electrifying researchers in the paranormal, your hosts, Timothy Beckley and Tim Swartz.
All right, welcome back to the final segment of Exploring the Bizarre. And Tim Beckley, you were asking Mac a question before I had to so rudely interrupt you for the break. So go for it.
Oh, I forgot what I was asking.
Yeah, I think you were asking about the Captain Mantell incident.
Oh, yes. Right. I'm sorry. Yeah, how my age memory. Well, you know the story, Mac. I mean, it's well known in the annals of UFO history. What was it that Mantell actually chased?
Well, no one really knows. It happened in the early 50s. He was flying in a formation of four, what we used to call P-51 Mustangs, but now they had been designated F-51s. And they were over the Tennessee, Kentucky area, and they were asked to check out what people thought at the time was a weather balloon. So, but two of the planes had to land because of fuel situations. Two of them, Mantell and another one, started climbing, and the second guy, I believe, pulled off, when he was reaching the ceiling limit of the P-51 Mustang. But Mantell just kept on flying, and he had a running commentary. I could see it. It's large. It looks silver, and so on. Then they lost contact with him. Now they find the airplane about an hour later. He's been killed, and the airplane is a wreck. But they've never found anything like that it had been hit by a weapon or anything like that. I mean, the chances were pretty good that he just flew too high and didn't have the pressurization that the Mustang would have, and the plane crashed. So. But that actually changed a lot of people's minds, because before that, people thought, well, hey, the UFOs, they're aliens, are going to be friendly. But that was like the first time, one of our pilots actually got killed. And, so it kind of got people thinking, some people thinking in another direction, they might not be that friendly.
Well, I've heard his family members or whoever still survives discuss the subject. And they're convinced that he chased something that was not of this earth.
Well, there's we don't know. That's the thing, but just the way he was an experienced pilot, he certainly shouldn't have flown higher than the airplane, was built for, which is very unusual, because pilots, are the most cautious people in the world just by nature. So that was his first mistake. And then, what happened after they lost radio communication with him, who knows? He did say it looked metallic. It was huge. I think later on they said he was chasing Venus, which was, the real kind of excuse du jour back then. So we don't know, but it really is, as you say, it's kind of a milestone in the annals of the early UFO era.
Well, the one case that even gets more attention than Mantell's does today was the one that took place in Australia with a pilot, Valencia, is that his name? Saw something strange and radioed it in, and he was never, the plane disappeared and he disappeared.
Mm-hmm. Well, planes disappear, and planes crash, and, planes go into the water, and you're never going to find them at that point. But just going back to what we were talking about in the previous segment, there just seems to be a lot of this stuff happens around, these hotspots or whatever, but a lot of it happens around military bases too. So, you have to think, well, what's happening here? In fact, when we did the book Beyond Area 51, where we talked about secret bases around the world, not Area 51, but all the others that we could find, just about all of them had a UFO history to them. Only Tonopah, Nevada, as it turns out, had very little of a UFO history when compared to other secret bases. So you kind of tend to ask yourself, what came first,
Well, I wonder if Tonopah doesn't have a lot of reported sightings because there's not that many people around there to begin with, and those who are, they can't talk about it.
Right, but it is and I would have thought that too. But it is known as like one of the best places in the country to for astronomers, amateur astronomers, to go and look at the sky. So. They actually run tours, for that purpose. So you think, well, you got a lot of people out there. They're astronomers. They're looking up at the sky. You'd think you'd have more UFO reports from that area than you do. Just the fact that you don't have a lot of them, it's like someone's trying to tell us something, but I'm not sure quite what.
Well, talking about UFOs and different modes of propulsion. So, Bruce, do you think that the electronic fog phenomena is something that is currently being studied for potential use, either military or what have you? Because I mean, guaranteed, if there's something to it, and you're talking about it now, then probably the military has been looking into it for the 20, 30 years or more.
Yeah, well, there's that famous story in where was it, Virginia, where one of their Navy vessels was transported when they were experimenting with this type of phenomenon.
Right, the Philadelphia experiment.
That's right. Yeah.
Right. But if I don't want to be the bucket of cold water here, but that they actually explain the Philadelphia experiment. What they were doing was, at the time in World War II, early World War II, they wanted to have some kind of a defense against German mines, and and they were magnetic mines back then. And what someone found out was that if you actually changed the electrical charge of the hull of a ship, it wouldn't attract the mines. It would actually cause them to go away. It would repel them. So that's what they were doing. It's called degaussing, and they actually were able to change the electrical charge of an entire ship as a way of preventing mines from sinking it. Yeah. And that story just kind of took on a life of its own, and off we went. But really, that's really the story behind it. Once again, sorry to be the bucket of cold water here. Yeah,
but there are scientists that are studying it. They've written to me, and there's one in Ukraine that's done a lot of research on it. And he thinks if he had the funding, he could create the electronic fog. He thinks he's like a doctor of chemistry. But I wanted to tell you about more about UFOs and my theories.
Please do.
There's a chapter about Joe McMoneagle. You guys know him? He's a well-known remote viewer. He's written like 4 books. Mm-hmm. He's good friends with my co-author Rob McGregor.
Okay.
Yeah. We've done a lot of remote viewing. We've had a lot of remote viewing guests on our radio show, so we're familiar with it.
Yeah. So he just did a chapter on my experience, and it's fairly interesting. But I was talking to him not long ago, and he got me thinking. He claims that he's gone almost inside, but not deep inside some of these UFOs with his mind. And his latest thoughts are that some of these UFOs are alive. The vessel itself, is an organism. And the aliens have learned how to work with this organism. And I've seen several UFOs that do remind me that they appear to be not like the perfect kind. I've seen many of them that I almost had crashed into one when I was flying once. That's a classic saucer shape with a dome on the top. And it's like maybe 200-300 feet wide and 40 feet thick or something like that. But and I've seen 5 of them flying in formation once too, all in the Bermuda Triangle. But anyway, there's one that's well known. They call it the cigar-shaped one, and there's been lots of photographs of it, and it's like close to a mile long.
Right. There's that's actually the #1 reported shape of UFOs. People think it's flying saucers, but more people see cigar-shaped objects than the saucer-shaped.
So when I first started doing my research, I picked up a book. I read all the books on UFOs. I didn't keep them. I stayed in the library, so I didn't keep it. But there was a South American doctor that took photos, close-ups of the cigar-shaped one, and it has like dimples in it, almost like a golf ball. But the dimples are not perfect. They're different sizes and slightly different shapes. And that's where I get the feeling that that thing is a living organism. And this is where Joe McMoneagle claims that he's been inside, but they won't let him get way inside. That's what they seem to modify it somehow and work with this living organism that has the capability to travel to different stars. And
well, actually, Kenneth Arnold, we were talking about him earlier. He believed he didn't believe that these were extraterrestrial craft. Well, maybe he did in the beginning, but most people don't realize that he had a total, I think, of 8 or 9 different sightings, and some of them he thought were living beings, and others he actually thought were vessels that were coming from the other side to take the spirits of the deceased to some other place, which actually is very interesting because I have something that I call the June 24th Enigma. More people have passed away in ufology on the anniversary of Kenneth Arnold's UFO sighting, June 24th, than on any other date. I mean, we're talking about 10 or 15 individuals, which certainly is a large number. And he believed that they were ships to take the spirits over. I don't know. I just think it's a very strange synchronicity and a coincidence. And to me, synchronicities are the very important part of the UFO phenomena. I mean, it's just the things that have happened to me over the year are just really totally bizarre. That's the only way I can describe it. And I'm not talking about thinking of somebody and they call on the phone 2 days later or something like that.
Well,
I'm talking about hardcore, yeah.
Talking about the idea that these ships or some of them could be, some kind of living organism or created organism. I mean, I have seen UFO films that show objects flying around in the sky, and these were actual films, not doctored, videotapes like you run across anymore, that show a number of objects in the sky that are flying around each other, and they behave like you would see insects flying around. They, zooming back and forth, almost like playing with each other. You just get the impression, looking at them, that you're looking at something that is either alive or so responsive that, for all intents and purposes, they could be alive.
Yeah, that latest video that the fighter jet, one of our jet fighter pilots took of the object right in front of them. There were 2 jets, but this object was it was tumbling. When I saw that, it looked like it was almost showing off or having fun in front of the jets because they couldn't keep up with it.
There was a one of the few studies that Project Blue Book tried to get off the ground in the early 50s was the Captain Ruppelt, who was in charge of that for a while. And there's a lot of controversy about how deeply he actually got into it. He seems to have like a 50-50 track record. But one thing he wanted to do, and you brought this up, was that some people would see swarms of UFOs and they would act just like you said, like a swarm of bees, not really in any kind of an organized way. They were all just kind of swarming and so on and so forth. And then other people would see like chevrons of UFOs flying overhead, flying almost like geese would. And that's kind of an intelligent way of flying because, they're following the leader. So what they wanted to do a study, a time motion study, to see if UFOs seem to fly under, let's say intelligent control, and that would be, the goose theory, or unintelligent control, and that would be like the flying insects theory. And it was a great proposal, but the Pentagon refused to fund it. So, had they done that, I think it would have been some interesting results.
And that UFO, that's the big one, the cigar-shaped one, I've heard where a lot of people have seen them and where they're in like a cloud. They're in a shrouded by a cloud, and so you really can't see them when they're in this cloud. So one of my theories, as far as UFOs goes, is that, remember when I told you how my first encounter was this lenticular-shaped cloud?
Mm-hmm.
Well, inside of that lenticular cloud, there could have been one of the cigar-shaped motherships hidden in there. And then I just happened to fly right over it when it was getting ready to exit Earth for another star. And then I got caught up in its wake turbulence. And part of their engine motive system helps to produce this electronic fog. It's part of their energy to transport themselves through space and time.
Well, that's just it then. So, are we talking about, when you talk about the electronic fog, talking about a natural phenomena or a phenomena that is produced as an after effect from, the propulsion of some type of unknown craft, or maybe both?
Right. It's like lightning. A couple of 100 years ago, we weren't able to really use the power of lightning, and now look what we've done with it. So now it's like this electronic fog. It has the power that has something to do with time.
Mm-hmm. When I was doing research for this program, I ran across a website that had tracked sunspot activity on the day when you had your first experience, December 1970, and I guess that there was an extremely high number of sunspots going on that day.
Yeah, there were. Professor Paris has explored all that. The sunspots as part of his theories, and yes, they were very abnormally high on that day. And then the weather was calm too. There wasn't hardly any wind. The winds were variable that day, and there were large, widely scattered thunderstorms.
Mm-hmm. So, has anybody attempted to work out a theory on how this kind of activity could be predicted? Kind of like weather reports. Don't fly off of the coast of Bimini today because there's a high chance of time-space continuums.
Well, that's one of our goals, Professor Paris and I, is to invent an instrument, or someone needs to invent it, that will detect areas of electronic fog. It's similar to like the storm scope that was invented only 20 years ago or so, that can detect lightning. See, first they created the radar. That was 60 years ago. It wasn't until like 20 years ago that they invented an instrument that detects the lightning bolts too. So one of the next future instruments should be one that can detect electronic fog because it'll help save lives. Similar, I believe the Malaysian airliner encountered the electronic fog.
Well, there's a lot of unexplained disappearances throughout history that I know a lot of people wish that they could come up with a good explanation. You know, the Malaysian flight, you know, like you said, you know, that's a perfect example.
I think that the Malaysian flight, to tell you the truth, just if I can throw my theory in, I think that the Malaysian flight had controls hacked by someone on the ground. They were able to take away the pilot's ability to steer the airplane, and they flew it out over the Indian Ocean, and they intentionally let it crash. And I think that was somebody somewhere telling us all that we can take over one of your airplanes anytime we want. There's been some very unusual airplane crashes since then. And, people can hack into our credit cards these days. They hack into our computers, our laptops, watching us through the cameras. Who said that they wouldn't be able to hack into the controls of an airplane, especially when don't have a whole lot of security against that type of thing?
Well, they couldn't do that in 1945 when the famous Flight 19 mysteriously, all 5 of them disappeared, and they never found not a trace. And that's another thing that kind of bothers me. It's like we found pieces of the Malaysian airline, but they had life rafts. They were wearing life vests. They should have found those floating somewhere.
Well, yeah, and there was also a rescue craft that went out looking for him as well. That one disappeared as well, just as completely.
Right. Right. 11 men on a flying boat, they used to call them, went out to look for them, and that disappeared as well. It's true.
All right, guys, we're getting close to the top of the hour, so I want to give you both a chance to let our audience know where they can find out more about you. So, Mac, let's start with you.
Well, the name of the latest book is Mac Maloney's Haunted Universe. You can get it on Amazon.com or at any bookstore, really, and BarnesandNoble.com. The publisher wants us to mention. And in some bookstores, if they don't have it in stock, you can actually have it printed up. Some of them are getting machines now that you can print up a book in 2 minutes, and you'd have your own book. So, and a lot of people are buying, of course, as ebooks. Anything else, on my books, previous books, and radio show, people can go to macmaloney.com and check out all the information we have there.
All right, and Bruce, what about you? Where can they find your books and your website?
Yeah, the books are at Amazon.com and different bookstores, and it's also available. My new book's available on audio book.
Oh, really? Wow.
Mm-hmm.
And what was your original book published by Llewellyn?
Yeah, Llewellyn.
Yeah, are they your current publisher now?
No, it's called New Page Books.
New Page. Well, of course, yes. Yeah.
And then my website is electronicfog.com. So you can tune into that and then see some of the videos. One of the neat videos on there is I didn't tell the story, but it took place in Indiana, and it's a radar image, but it shows these rings forming, which seem to be identical to the storm that I flew through. It formed instantly. It spread out almost instantly in about a 40-mile diameter, and they're all like donut-shaped storms that form simultaneously. That's another story now that we're running out of time.
All right. Well, and Tim, I just want to remind everyone that we also have the trilogy of terror books.
Oh, well, you're absolutely right. Three of our best books. We have so many great books.
They're all great.
I think we're almost up to 300 titles, just hovering right around there. But if you want the 3 latest books, we got a really good Christmas surprise for you. If you go to the website conspiracyjournal.com, we got Alien Bloodlust, UFO Hostilities, and Screwed by the Aliens at a very special price. Or drop me an email, mrufo8@hotmail.com. And don't forget the archives here at KCOR. You'll find all our shows. And don't forget our YouTube channel, Mr. UFO's Secret Files, with, I don't know how many guests we got, 500, 600, 700 now altogether.
That's right. Well, okay,
And
Tim.
that's all in one program.
That's right. Well, that's all she wrote for tonight.
There you go. Good night, ladies and gentlemen, and people from out there and inside the earth even. What the heck? Let's not forget about them. And in saucer bases, underwater, everywhere.
You've been listening to Exploring the Bizarre with hosts Timothy Beckley and Tim Swartz. They're taking back the night by jetting non-stop across the cosmos in search of the truly bizarre and totally unexplained, with you as their co-pilot. Thursday nights at 7 p.m. Pacific, 10 p.m. Eastern, on the KCOR Digital Radio Network. For more information on Exploring the Bizarre and hosts Timothy Beckley and Tim Swartz, check out their KCOR Digital Radio Network page. Follow their YouTube channel at MRUFO 1100. Exploring the Bizarre.